Hey everyone, today we're diving into how Elon Musk once survived on just $1 a day while building his first company. And this isn't some motivational speaker bullshit. This is documented financial desperation that shaped the richest man in the world. Picture this. It's 1995, and you're standing outside a cramped office building in Palo Alto, California. The dot-com boom is just beginning to whisper its promises. But inside this building, two South African brothers are living like refugees in their own startup. The older brother, Elon, has just dropped out of Stanford after literally 2 days, not because he was failing, but because he saw something his professors couldn't. The internet was about to change everything, and he had maybe 6 months to catch the wave before it crashed over him. Here's what makes this absolutely insane. While his Stanford classmates were burning through daddy's money at fancy restaurants, Elon was rationing his food budget to $30 per month. That's $1 per day. Not $1 for coffee, $1 for all food, period. We're talking about a guy who would later buy Twitter for $44 billion, surviving on less money than most people spend on a single energy drink. But here's the kicker that reframes everything. This wasn't just poverty. This was strategic resource allocation under extreme constraints. The same mathematical thinking that would later optimize rocket fuel efficiency and battery performance was being applied to human survival. Every calorie had to justify its cost. Every expense had to generate maximum return on investment. If this kind of business detective work fascinates you, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking business stories. Drop a comment with what modern company reminds you most of this story, because I guarantee you'll see patterns that'll blow your mind. The crazy part? This level of financial discipline wasn't born from some trust fund kid playing startup games. Elon had arrived in North America with basically nothing, worked brutal jobs to pay for college. And now he was betting everything on an idea called Zip2, a company that would help newspapers get online. His competitors were established tech companies with millions in funding. His advantage? He literally couldn't afford to fail, while they could afford to be lazy. Now, let me take you back to witness how this incredible story unfolded. Because what happened next reveals exactly why extreme constraints often create the most innovative solutions. You're watching Elon wake up on the floor of his office at 7 a.m. And the first decision of his day isn't about product strategy or market positioning. It's whether he can afford to shower. Because here's what nobody talks about when they glorify startup life. When your office doubles as your bedroom, basic human hygiene becomes a business expense. The YMCA membership cost $20 per month. That's 2/3 of his entire food budget. But Elon had discovered something brilliant. You could sneak in during peak hours when the desk staff was overwhelmed, hit the showers, and disappear before anyone noticed. This wasn't just desperation. This was operational efficiency under resource constraints. Every successful infiltration meant he could meet with potential investors without looking like he'd been living in a dumpster. Meanwhile, his brother Kimball was running their customer acquisition strategy, which consisted of literally walking into newspaper offices and cold pitching editors who had never heard of this thing called the World Wide Web. Picture this. Two guys with South African accents trying to convince old-school journalists that people would soon read news on computer screens instead of paper. The rejection rate was brutal. Roughly 95% of meetings ended with thanks. But newspapers will never go digital. But here's what's absolutely fascinating. While established competitors like Yellow Pages was spending millions on market research and focus groups, Elon was getting real-time feedback by building the product with his bare hands. He'd code for 18 hours, sleep for 4, shower at the YMCA, then immediately test new features with actual customers. The feedback loop was instant because failure meant homelessness. This is exactly what today's most successful startups do when they practice lean methodology. Except Elon wasn't following some business school framework. He was literally too broke to waste time on anything that didn't directly generate revenue. Every line of code had to justify its existence. Every feature had to solve a real problem, because there was zero buffer for theoretical bullshit. The psychological pressure was insane. Imagine coding the future of digital media while your stomach is growling because you spent your daily dollar on ramen noodles instead of a proper meal. But that hunger became fuel. When you're surviving on $1 a day, every potential customer interaction becomes life or death important. You can't afford to be casual about closing deals when rent money depends on commission. What his competitors didn't know was that this extreme financial constraint was creating the most valuable business skill possible: the ability to separate essential from optional under pressure. You're standing in their office at 9 p.m., and what you see would make every modern startup founder with their Herman Miller chairs and kombucha taps feel embarrassed about their complaints. Elon and Kimball have created the ultimate lean operation. Their desks are empty pizza boxes stacked on top of each other. Their chairs are borrowed from a neighboring business after hours, and their bed is literally the floor with a sleeping bag. But here's the holy shit moment that changes everything. This wasn't just making do with less. This was accidentally discovering the perfect startup environment. When your furniture budget is zero, you can't waste time on office politics or impressive conference rooms. Every conversation happens around the same pizza box desk where the actual work gets done. No bureaucracy, no hierarchy, just pure execution speed. The tactical breakdown is brilliant. Elon had essentially created a 24/7 development cycle without realizing it. When your bedroom is your office, the traditional work-life balance disappears. But so does the friction between thinking and doing. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. with a solution to a coding problem and immediately start typing. No commute, no office setup time, no "let me grab coffee first," just instant implementation of ideas. Meanwhile, their biggest competitor was a company called CitySearch, which had just raised $8 million in venture funding. While CitySearch was spending months debating office space and hiring protocols, Zip2 was shipping new features weekly. The constraint that seemed like a disadvantage, having no money for a proper office setup, was actually their secret weapon for moving faster than well-funded competitors. This is exactly what Netflix did when they disrupted Blockbuster. While Blockbuster was investing millions in physical stores and inventory management, Netflix was running experiments from a tiny office with a simple hypothesis: people would choose convenience over tradition. The winner wasn't the company with better offices. It was the company that eliminated unnecessary friction. Here's what's psychologically fascinating. Extreme constraint forces pattern recognition that abundance masks. When Elon couldn't afford multiple computers, he became obsessed with code efficiency. When he couldn't afford market research, he became brilliant at reading customer behavior directly. When he couldn't afford employee salaries, he became a master at doing everything himself. Each limitation was building a superpower. The pizza box desk became legendary in Silicon Valley folklore. But the real insight is deeper. Sometimes the most innovative solutions come from being forced to question assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. While competitors were asking, "How do we build a proper tech company?" Elon was asking, "What's the minimum viable setup to solve customer problems?" You're sitting in the back of a borrowed Honda Civic on a Tuesday morning in 1996, watching Elon rehearse his pitch one final time before the most important meeting of his life. His hands are shaking, not from nerves, but from low blood sugar, because he's been surviving on oranges for 3 days straight to save money for a decent shirt. The numbers are brutal: $28,000 in student loan debt, credit cards maxed out, and exactly $47 left in their business account. Here's the mind-blowing part. While walking into this investor meeting, Elon wasn't just pitching a business idea, he was literally pitching for his survival. The investor was Davido Ventures, and they were known for writing checks or crushing dreams in under 30 minutes. If this meeting failed, Zip2 would die, and Elon would have to choose between bankruptcy or crawling back to finish his Stanford degree with his tail between his legs. But what his competitors didn't know was that this desperation had created something incredibly valuable: absolute clarity about what mattered. When you're living on dollar-a-day budgets, you can't bullshit about synergies or market positioning. You have to prove that real customers will pay real money for your product immediately. Elon walked in with actual newspaper contracts, real usage statistics, and paying customers, while most startups were still building PowerPoint presentations. The tactical genius here is that extreme financial pressure had forced them to solve the hardest STARTUP problem first: product market fit. While well-funded competitors were spending months on market research and focus groups, Zip2 had already proven demand by building something people actually wanted to buy. The constraint that seemed like weakness, having no money for traditional business development, had actually forced them to become customer-obsessed from day one. This is exactly what happened when Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia started Airbnb by selling Obama O's cereal boxes to survive. The financial desperation forced them to get creative about revenue generation, which led to the insight that people would pay to stay in strangers' homes. The constraint created the breakthrough. Here's what's psychologically fascinating. Elon had discovered that when survival is on the line, your brain operates at maximum efficiency. Every decision becomes crystal clear, because you can't afford to waste time on anything that doesn't directly impact success. The meeting wasn't just about getting funding. It was about proving that extreme constraints can create better businesses than comfortable abundance. The investor looked at their numbers, their customer contracts, their insane growth rate achieved with virtually no capital, and asked one question that would change everything: how much do you need to scale this properly? That moment would determine whether Elon's dollar-a-day experiment would become Silicon Valley legend or cautionary tale. You're watching Elon's face as the investor slides a term sheet across the conference table, and for the first time in months, you see something that's been completely absent: relief. Davido Ventures just offered $3 million for Zip2. But here's the catch that nobody saw coming. They want to bring in a professional CEO to replace Elon, essentially demoting him to Chief Technology Officer in his own company. The peak moment arrives when Elon has to make the most brutal decision of his entrepreneurial life: take the money and lose control, or reject the funding and potentially watch everything collapse. This isn't theoretical startup drama. This is a 25-year-old immigrant who's been eating oranges for weeks, facing the choice between financial security and maintaining his vision for the company he built from nothing. Here's the holy shit moment. Elon says yes to the funding but negotiates to keep significant equity and technical control. What seems like compromise was actually strategic brilliance. He realized that $3 million in professional management could scale Zip2 faster than his pizza box operation ever could, while his ownership stake would compound exponentially if the company succeeded. The immediate aftermath was shocking. Within 6 months, Zip2 had real offices, actual employees, and professional sales teams. But the most incredible part: Elon's dollar-a-day survival skills became the company's competitive advantage. While new employees debated expense account policies, Elon was still sleeping in the office and working 100-hour weeks, setting a pace that competitors with comfortable funding couldn't match. The ripple effects were immediate and massive. Newspapers that had rejected them 6 months earlier were now calling back, desperate to get online before their competitors. The New York Times, Knight Ridder, and Hearst Corporation all became customers. What started as two brothers sneaking showers at the YMCA had become the backbone of digital newspaper publishing. But here's what's absolutely fascinating. The extreme constraints that nearly killed the company had actually built the perfect foundation for scaling. The code was lean because they couldn't afford bloat. The customer focus was laser sharp because they couldn't survive without revenue. The work ethic was unbreakable because they'd already survived the worst possible conditions. By 1999, 4 years after the $1-a-day experiment, Compaq Computer Corporation acquired Zip2 for $307 million. Elon's share was $22 million, literally going from $1 per day to millions overnight. The pizza box desk that had symbolized poverty became the launch pad for what would eventually become PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX. The constraint that nearly destroyed him had actually created the exact mindset needed to build billion-dollar companies. You're looking at the long-term impact of Elon's $1-a-day experiment, and what emerges is a completely different understanding of how constraint creates competitive advantage. The Zip2 acquisition wasn't just a financial win. It established the blueprint that every modern unicorn startup now follows. Extreme resource discipline in early stages, obsessive customer focus, and the willingness to sacrifice comfort for speed. The regulatory and industry changes that resulted were massive. Zip2's success proved that small, lean teams could outmaneuver established media companies, which triggered a complete transformation of how newspapers approached digital strategy. By 2000, virtually every major publication had rushed online, creating the entire digital media landscape we know today. The company that started with pizza box desks had essentially forced traditional media to evolve or die. But here's what's absolutely fascinating about pattern recognition. You can see Elon's $1-a-day methodology in every company he's built since. Tesla's early production happened in a small factory in Fremont where Elon literally slept on the floor during production hell. SpaceX started in a warehouse where engineers built rockets with more constraints than NASA, but achieved faster innovation cycles. The constraint mindset became his permanent operating system. Modern entrepreneurs are now deliberately imposing artificial constraints to recreate this effect. Companies like Basecamp famously limit their team size and refuse venture funding to maintain the hunger that abundance kills. Warby Parker started by selling glasses from their apartment, using financial limitation to force creative customer acquisition strategies. Even Facebook began with Mark Zuckerberg coding in his Harvard dorm room, using dormitory internet and borrowed servers. The psychological insight that's reshaping modern business thinking is profound. Comfort is the enemy of innovation. When you can afford to hire consultants, you stop thinking creatively. When you have unlimited marketing budgets, you stop understanding customers deeply. When you have fancy offices, you start focusing on image instead of results. The $1-a-day experience taught Elon that artificial scarcity creates authentic innovation. Here's how today's entrepreneurs can apply this immediately. Instead of raising maximum funding, raise minimum viable funding. Instead of hiring full teams, stay lean until you prove product market fit. Instead of perfect office spaces, work from constraints that force efficiency. The goal isn't poverty, it's creating the mental state where every decision matters because waste equals death. The 3 game-changing lessons are: extreme constraints force clarity about what actually matters. Customer obsession emerges naturally when survival depends on revenue. And the habits formed under pressure become competitive advantages when resources increase. Which brings up the fascinating question: if financial comfort kills innovation, how do successful entrepreneurs maintain hunger after they've already won?